Hi, and welcome to episode 9 of A Journey Back to You. We are in the penultimate episode of the series, and this episode resonates very deeply with me and my journey. A pressure, constant, background, so familiar that we've stopped recognizing it as pressure at all. The pressure to be on time, not clock time, lifetime. By a certain age, you should be here. You should have figured this out by now. You should be more settled, more certain, more arrived than this. Your career should be further along. Your relationships should be more resolved. Your sense of self should be clearer. And even when no one around you is saying it out loud, even when the people in your life have stopped asking the questions they used to ask, the expectation lives on inside you. Self-generated, self-imposed, a judge you carry everywhere you go, quietly measuring you against a timeline you set for yourself a long time ago, in a version of your life that no longer exists. Today we dismantle that. One of the most liberating things I have ever truly understood, not just intellectually, but in my own heart, is this. There is no universal time for a life. When you look closely at the people around you, you begin to see the truth of this. No one is actually on the same schedule. Some people build early and question later. Some question for years and then build with extraordinary clarity and focus. Some take detours that look like failure from the outside and turn out to be the most important chapters of their whole story. Some grow slowly, invisibly, in ways that no one can see, until one day something blooms that was being prepared for decades. I left a career in my 30s with no plan. I started a skincare business from a personal problem in my kitchen with no training and no roadmap. I rebuilt my life more than once, after chapters that ended in ways I hadn't chosen. None of it happened on any conventional schedule, and yet, looking back, it all happened at exactly the right time. I just couldn't see that from inside those moments. From inside those moments, I felt late, behind, like everyone else had figured out something and I was still fumbling towards it. The idea that there is one correct pace, one right timing, one trajectory that constitutes a properly lived life, that is a story we inherited. From cultures that prize early achievement, from systems built for efficiency rather than humanity, from comparison, which has a way of making everyone feel like they're losing a race no one really signed up for. It is not a law of nature, it is a story, and you can put it down. There's a sentence I come back to often, especially on the days when I feel that old urgency rising in me again, when the pressure to perform, to produce, to be somewhere further along starts to build. What's meant for you won't rush you, confuse you, or pressure you. The first time I really sat with that, something released in me, because pressure had been my compass for a very long time. Deadlines, professional and self-imposed, urgency about the future, that low-level hum of not being where I should be by now. But the moments that truly changed my life didn't arrive with force. They arrived with a kind of readiness, almost gently. The morning I decided to leave my career. There was no dramatic deadline, ultimatum, or moment of crisis. There was a morning and a knowing that had been building for a long time. And finally, that had to have enough space to surface. The afternoon I made my first 𝐓𝐵O formula. That wasn't a business decision. It was a curious afternoon in my kitchen, following a thread of interest with no particular outcome in mind. The conversations with my daughters that reminded me, in the simplest and most grounding terms, what all this was actually for. None of those moments were forced. They weren't produced by pushing harder or willing myself to get there faster. They were ready. I was ready, and the timing was, looking back, exactly right. Even the parts that felt impossibly hard while I was living them. That's the thing about timing. You really recognize it as right when you're inside it. You recognize it later when you can see what it made possible. I want to talk about that feeling of being behind because I don't think it deserves a simple reassurance. I think it deserves a proper look. The feeling of being behind is almost always a comparison. You are measuring yourself against a timeline, someone else's, a cultural narrative, a version of yourself you imagined 10 or 15 years ago, and you are finding yourself lacking now. But here's what I want you to notice about that comparison. It is always unfair because the version of you that should be further along by now doesn't have the context you have. It doesn't know about the years spent caring for someone else, or the health challenge that took everything you had, or the relationship that needed more of you than you expected, or the decade that looked like treading water but was actually laying foundations you're still standing on. That earlier version of you didn't account for the detours that turned out to be the education, the delays that turned out to be the protection, the closed doors that turned out to be the redirections. You are not the same person who made those expectations for yourself. You have lived more, lost more, learned more, and become more than that earlier version could ever have anticipated. Being somewhere different from where you imagined is not the same as being behind. It is simply being where you actually are. And where you actually are has value. Right now, as it is, before you've fixed anything or arrived anywhere, the place you're standing has something to offer you, if you stop long enough to let it. One of the most useful frameworks I've found for understanding my own timing is the idea of seasons. Not as a way to excuse avoidance or stagnation, but as a way to stop fighting myself. There are seasons for building, when energy is high, direction feels clear, and creating becomes natural. Seasons for questioning, when old certainties fall away and you genuinely don't know what comes next, and that not knowing is the work. Seasons for shedding, when what you carried for a long time needs to be released, and the real task is letting go rather than acquiring. And seasons for integration, when things need time to settle into you, to become part of who you are, before you can use them. When you try to build in a shedding season, everything feels wrong, heavy, like you're pushing through concrete. When you rest in a building season, you feel restless and guilty and unfocused. The season is asking one thing of you and you trying to do another. And the gap between those two things is where a lot of suffering in our lives happen. Discomfort isn't always a sign that something is wrong. Sometimes it's a mismatch between what you're doing and the season you're actually in. And when you recognize that, when you ask yourself honestly, What season am I in right now? And you answer truthfully, something in you softens. You stop working against yourself, and the energy you were spending on that internal fight becomes available for something else, for living, for being where you actually are instead of where you think you should be. I found that question, what season am I in, to be one of the most grounding things I can ask myself. Not what should I be doing, not where should I be by now, just what is this season asking of me? And can I respect that, even if it's not what I chose? I want to share something I've come to believe, not because it's a comforting idea, but because it has proven itself true again and again in my life and in the lives of women I've spoken to. The things that felt like setbacks were often the very things that made what came next possible. The career that ended, the relationship that didn't survive, the plan that fell apart, the year that felt wasted. When you look back at these things from enough distance, you start to see a different story. Not that the pain wasn't real, it was. Not that the loss didn't matter, it did. But that something was being shaped in those seasons that couldn't have been shaped any other way. You were being prepared for a version of yourself you couldn't see yet. That's not a tidy, comfortable idea. It doesn't make the hard things feel easy, but it does change your relationship to where you are right now. Because if the difficult seasons of your past turned out to have purpose, and most of them did, then it's possible that the difficult season you're in right now is doing the same thing. It's possible that this period you're trying to get through is actually a period that is making you into something, not in spite of the difficulty, but because of it. You are not late, not for life, not for growth, not for becoming who you are meant to be. There is no committee deciding whether you made the deadline. There is no version of a good life that you have missed your window for. The window is open. It has always been open. The only thing that ever closes is the decision to stop. And you haven't stopped. You're here, you're listening to this, which means something in you is still reaching, still curious, still willing to consider that things could be different or deeper or more alive than they currently are. That is not the posture of someone who is too late. That is the posture of someone who is still in the middle of becoming. Becoming takes time. Real becoming, the kind that changes who you are at the level of how you see, how you respond, what you value, what you're willing to carry, and what you're willing to put down, that doesn't happen quickly. It doesn't happen on a schedule. It happens in its own time in response to the specific life you have lived in ways that belong entirely to you. Trust that, even when you can't see it, especially when you can't see it. I want to leave you with these 3 things to sit down with this week. The first, think of a time that felt, in the moment, like a delay or a detour, a plan that didn't work out, a door that closed, a season that seemed to go on too long. And then think about what that period actually gave you, what it taught you, what it made possible that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. Write it down if you can. There's something about putting it into words that makes the pattern visible in a way that thinking alone doesn't. Secondly, ask yourself honestly, what season am I in right now? Not what season you wish you were in, not what season you think you should be in, the actual season. And then ask, what does this season genuinely ask of me? What is the true work of this particular time. And third, say this once today, out loud if you're able to, or in writing if it feels more natural to you. I am not behind. I am becoming. And just notice what happens in your body when you say it. Notice where something in you resists it, or whether something in you recognizes it as true. Next week is our final episode. We come home. We bring everything together, the creativity, the timing, the identity, the body, all of it. And we talk about what it actually means to live this journey, not just understand it. I'll see you then. Thank you for being here. It genuinely means a lot to me.